Stop right now. If you are listening to this because you want to study English, turn this off. Seriously. Go find a textbook, go do a grammar quiz. But if you are here because you are tired of feeling like a genius in your head, but sounding like a toddler when you open your mouth, then stay. Because today, we are going to burn the old way of learning.
Wow, Knox, starting with fire today. But you're right, it's a literal prison. I remember sitting in a cafe in London 3 years ago. I had my advanced English certificate in my bag. I knew every tense. Past perfect, easy. Conditionals, no problem. But when the waiter asked me, "What can I get you, love?" my brain, it just snoozing. It went to sleep.
The system crash. It's the most embarrassing feeling in the world, isn't it? You've spent thousands of dollars, thousands of hours, and yet a simple question about coffee makes you sweat.
Oh, I was sweating. I was staring at the menu like it was written in ancient hieroglyphics. I knew the word for milk, I knew the word for coffee, but my brain was busy trying to remember if I should use the present perfect or the simple present to order a latte. It was pathetic.
This is what I call the B1 trap. And here is the shocking truth for everyone listening. The reason you can't speak isn't that you haven't studied enough. It's actually because you have studied too much of the wrong thing. Whistle?
That sounds crazy to most people, Knox. Too much study? My teachers always told me, "Leia, if you can't speak, you need more grammar."
Of course they did, because grammar is easy to sell. It's easy to put in a book. But speaking is a high-speed sport. Imagine trying to learn how to play football by reading a manual about the physics of air pressure inside the ball. You'd get destroyed on the field.
Exactly. That was me. I was a physics of football expert who couldn't kick the ball.
Let me ask you something, Leia, and everyone listening, think about this. How many times have you learned the present perfect?
At least 50 times. Every year, a new teacher starts with, "Today we learn have plus past participle." And every year I say, "I know this," and then I still can't use it in a conversation.
Exactly. Here is the shocker. If you have to think about a rule, you don't know the language. You only know about the language. There is a massive gap between knowledge and automaticity. Most of you listening are English encyclopedias, but you aren't English speakers.
Ugh, that hurts, Knox. But it's true. I felt like an encyclopedia that was missing half its pages when I tried to talk to a real person.
Don't feel bad. It's not your fault. You've been programmed to translate. Think about it. You hear English, translate to your language, think of answer, translate to English, speak. That process takes 3 seconds. In a real conversation, 3 seconds is an eternity. People have already moved on.
Yes. By the time I had my perfect sentence ready, the waiter was already serving the next person. I was left there standing with my perfect grammar and no coffee. Pouting sound.
So, let's talk about why 16,000 people, including our listeners, feel stuck at this intermediate plateau. Why do we get to B1 and then stop? It's like hitting a brick wall made of dictionaries.
For me, it was fear. When you are a beginner, you're happy to say, "I am Leia. I like apples." It's a win. But at B1, you start wanting to express your personality. You want to be funny. You want to be professional. But your English is like a cage. You feel like a small version of yourself.
A small version of yourself. I love that. You feel like your IQ drops 50 points the moment you switch to English. You're a CEO in your home country, but in English, you sound like a 5-year-old.
Yes, I felt so stupid. I wanted to talk about politics and art, but I could only talk about my favorite hobby. I like swimming. Swimming is good. I hated it.
This is where most people quit. Or worse, they go back to school to study more grammar, which is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. The solution isn't more rules. The solution is deletion. Deletion? You mean forgetting things?
Exactly. You need to delete the translator in your head. You need to stop being a student and start being an improviser. Leia, when you finally broke through, what was the first thing you stopped doing?
I stopped carrying a dictionary, seriously. I used to look up every single word I didn't know. If I was watching a movie, I would pause it every 10 seconds.
Oh man, that sounds boring.
It was miserable. It took me 4 hours to watch a 20-minute show. And you know what? I didn't remember any of the words the next day anyway. My brain was exhausted.
Because your brain isn't a hard drive, Leia. It's a filter. If you force it to remember everything, it chooses to remember nothing. It's like trying to catch 100 tennis balls at once. You'll drop them all.
That's so true. I was covered in vocabulary tennis balls and I couldn't speak a word. Listen closely. The top 1% of English learners, the ones who sound like natives, they don't use more words than you. They use fewer words, but they use them in chunks.
Chunks? Like chocolate chunks? Munching sound.
No, language chunks. Instead of learning I want to go to the store, they learn the sound pattern I want to go to the. It's one piece of information, not 7.
Ah, like a Lego block.
Precisely. If you build with dust, your house falls down. If you build with Lego blocks, you can build a skyscraper in an hour. Most B1 learners are trying to build houses with dust. They're trying to glue individual words together with grammar rules.
And the glue is always wet. It never sticks.
Exactly. That's why you hesitate. That's why you say, you're looking for the glue.
So, in this first part of our journey, are we telling people to throw away their grammar books?
I'm telling them to bury them, at least for the next 30 days. If you are at A2 or B1, you already have enough bricks. You just don't have the blocks. You need to stop learning what to say and start learning how it sounds.
It's about the ear, not the eye.
Yes, Leia, you're hitting the nail on the head. We spend 12 years in school reading a language, but language isn't visual. It's acoustic. It's a vibration in the air. When you try to see the words in your head while speaking, you're using the wrong part of your brain.
No wonder I had a headache every time I went to an English party. I was trying to read a conversation that was moving at 100 miles per hour.
Exactly. You were trying to use a map while driving in a race. You need to stop looking at the map and start feeling the road. But here's the problem. Even if you know this, even if you know you need to stop translating, how do you actually do it? How do you stop your brain from doing something it has done for 10 years?
That's the hard part. It's like trying to stop breathing.
It's a habit, and habits can be hacked. In the next part, Leia is going to share the dark side of her English journey, the moment she almost gave up completely, and the one 5-minute ear hack that changed everything.
That was a tough day. I remember sitting on the floor of my apartment crying because I couldn't even call the landlord to fix a leak.
Empathetic. We've all been there, but that leak led to a flood of fluency.
Nice pun, Knox.
I try. But seriously, if you are listening to this and you feel like Leia, stuck, tired, and feeling small, don't go anywhere, because the B1 prison has a secret door, and we're about to open it.
Are we going to talk about the shadowing secret?
Not yet, Leia. We have to make them wait just a little longer. Normal volume. But first, we need to talk about the vocabulary lie, the lie that tells you that you need 10,000 words to be fluent.
Wait, you don't?
Not even close. I know people with 20,000 words who can't order a pizza. I know people with 500 words who can lead a meeting.
Now that is something I need to hear.
Do you want the key? Stay with us for part 2. It's time to stop studying. It's time to start speaking. Sound of a door slamming shut, dramatic music fade out.
Clapping. Welcome back.
If you're just joining us, you missed a funeral. We just buried the English grammar textbook. In part 1, we talked about why your brain crashes like an old computer when you try to speak, but now we're going to talk about the biggest scam in the English learning industry.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about, Knox. The more is better scam.
Exactly. Let's get real. Everyone listening right now probably has a notebook somewhere. It's full of advanced words like nevertheless, furthermore, and obfuscate. Honestly, Leia, when was the last time you used the word obfuscate in a real conversation?
Never. I don't even think I know what it means without checking my phone. But that's the problem, isn't it? We are told that to be advanced, we need big words. We think that if we use smart words, we will sound fluent.
Right. It's like putting a Ferrari engine inside a bicycle. It doesn't make the bicycle a car, it just makes it explode. Explosion sound effect. Listen to me. Native speakers, even CEOs and professors, use the same 500 to 800 words for 90% of their daily lives.
Only 800? That's it? I probably know 5,000 words. Why do I still feel like I'm struggling to breathe when I talk?
Because your 5,000 words are passive. They are ghosts in your brain. You recognize them when you see them on a page, but when you open your mouth, they vanish. They aren't yours. You don't own them.
That is so true. It's like having a bank account with $1 million, but you lost the credit card. You know the money is there, but you can't buy a coffee.
Brilliant analogy, Leia. That is exactly what the B1 level feels like. It's language poverty with a wealthy brain. The vocabulary lie is that you need more words. The truth is, you need stronger connections to the words you already have.
So, how do we fix it? Do we just stop learning new words?
We stop memorizing and start mapping. But before we get to the map, I want to hear about the leak. In part 1, you mentioned a day you almost gave up, the day you were crying on your floor. Empathetic tone. Tell us what happened.
Voice softens, emotional. It was a Tuesday. I had been living in Vancouver for 4 months. I had spent thousands of hours studying. I thought I was ready. But then a pipe burst in my kitchen. Water was everywhere. Splash. It was a disaster. I picked up the phone to call my landlord, a nice old man named Mr. Henderson.
Softly. And?
Voice trembling slightly. I couldn't do it. I sat there with the phone in my hand, watching water ruin my floor, and I realized I didn't know how to explain a leak. I didn't know how to say pipe. I knew the word for government and environment, but I couldn't explain water on my floor. I felt so small. I felt like a failure. I started crying because I realized all my study was useless.
That's the moment, isn't it? The moment the B1 prison feels like it's made of steel.
Exactly. I eventually just sent him a photo because I was too scared to talk. But that night, after I cleaned up the water, I realized something. I had been learning English for the classroom, but I was living in the world.
And that's when you found the ear hack, right?
Yes, but it wasn't a choice, it was an accident. I was so tired of studying that I just put on a podcast, not an English lesson, just a real story, and I did something different.
Listen up. If you are driving, pay attention. If you are walking, stop for a second. This is the ear hack that moves people from B1 to C1 in record time. Leia, tell them.
I stopped trying to understand the words. I started trying to feel the music.
Whistle. Explain that. That sounds like some new age hippie stuff.
I know. But listen, I took a 5-minute clip of a podcast. I listened to it 10 times in a row, but each time I had a different mission. Time 1, just get the vibe. Time 2, listen for the stops, where the speaker breathes. Time 3, listen for the highs, the words they emphasize. Time 4, here is the secret. I tried to hum the melody of their voice without saying any words.
Intense. This is huge. You were training your acoustic brain, not your grammar brain.
Exactly. By the 10th time, I wasn't translating the sentences anymore. The sentences were just in me. I could hear the chunks Knox mentioned earlier. I didn't hear, I have been working. I heard, I've been working. It became one sound.
Laughing. It's like a song. You don't translate a song, you just know how it feels.
Yes, and here is the hack part. After 5 minutes of this deep listening, I tried to say the sentences out loud, but I didn't try to read them. I tried to sing them. I tried to match the speaker's emotion.
To the audience, did you hear that? Match the emotion. Most of you sound like robots because you're afraid of making a mistake. You speak in a flat line. I am going to the store now. No wonder your brain is bored. No wonder your listeners are bored.
I was a total robot, Knox. I was Robot Leia. But when I started singing the English, my mouth muscles actually started to feel different. It felt like a workout.
Serious tone. Let's combine this with the vocabulary lie. If you apply this ear hack to the most common 500 words in English, you will sound more fluent than a PhD student who knows 20,000 words but only reads them.
It's about density, isn't it?
Exactly. I call it the 80-20 fluency rule. 80% of your speaking success comes from 20% of your vocabulary, but that 20% has to be high definition. You have to know how those words sound when they are angry, when they are happy, and when they are tired.
So, instead of learning 10 new words today, our listeners should take one 5-minute podcast clip and listen to it 10 times.
Shouting, yes! Stop adding more dust to your brain. Start polishing the bricks you already have. If you can master the melody of actually, basically, I was thinking, and you know what I mean, you will sound B2 in a week.
Teasing, but Knox, what if they don't know what the words mean?
Sarcastic. That's what Google is for, Leia. But don't do it first. The ear hack works because you give your brain a puzzle. If you give it the answer immediately by looking at a translation, the brain goes, it stops working. It stops hunting for the meaning.
That makes sense. My brain only started hunting when the water was on the floor. I had to survive.
Intense. You have to create that survival feeling in your practice. You have to make your brain work for the meaning.
Okay, Knox, so we've broken the grammar addiction, we've exposed the vocabulary lie, and we have the ear hack, but there's still one big problem.
Oh, I know what it is. It's the ghost in the room.
The fear.
The fear of looking stupid. The fear that even if you have the melody and the chunks, you'll still freeze when a real person looks you in the eye.
Sighs. That's the hardest part. You can practice in your room all day, but as soon as someone says hello, your heart starts racing.
Heartbeat sound effect. Low, conspiratorial voice. What if I told you there's a way to practice with a real person without actually talking to a real person?
Gasp. Are you talking about AI?
No. AI is a tool, but it doesn't have a soul. I'm talking about something much older, something that spies and actors use to learn languages in weeks, not years.
Excited. Is this the shadowing secret we mentioned earlier?
Smiling. It's more than shadowing. It's the mirror method. And in part 3, we're going to show you exactly how to use it to kill the fear of speaking forever.
To the audience, you don't want to miss this. This was the part where I finally stopped crying on my kitchen floor and started leading meetings in English.
High energy. Get your headphones ready. Get your mirrors ready. It's time to stop being a small version of yourself. Part 3 is coming. It's time to get loud.
Sound of glass shattering / dramatic music swell.
Laughing. See you in part 3.
Fading out. Don't translate, just listen. Music ends abruptly.
Let's talk about the ghost in your room. No, I'm not talking about a movie. I'm talking about that cold, tight feeling in your chest when a native speaker walks toward you. Your palms get sweaty, your heart starts doing a drum solo, lub-dub, and suddenly all that English you studied vanishes.
It's the worst feeling in the world, Knox. It's like being paralyzed while you're standing up. You want to run, but your legs are made of lead.
Exactly. Most teachers tell you just be confident. Thanks. That's like telling a person who is drowning to just breathe. It's useless advice. Confidence isn't a feeling you just turn on, Leia. Confidence is a skill you build in the dark.
In the dark? Are we becoming ninjas now, Knox?
Basically, English ninjas. Because if you can't speak English when you are alone, you will never speak it when you are under pressure. This is where the mirror method comes in. And no, it's not just talking to yourself. That's what everyone else does, and that's why they stay stuck.
Okay, you've got my attention. When I was in Vancouver, I talked to myself all the time. I'd say, Leia, you need to buy bread. But the moment I got to the store, silence. So what's the difference?
The difference is performance. Listen to me. Spies, actors, and top-tier diplomats don't learn languages. They learn personas. When you speak English, you shouldn't be Leia from home trying to use English words. You need to be English Leia.
A different version of me? That sounds like I'm lying.
It's not a lie, it's a liberation. Think about it. Your native language is tied to your childhood, your family, your mistakes. English is your action hero language. In English, you can be whoever you want.
I like the sound of that. Action hero Leia. But how does the mirror help?
The mirror is your first audience. Most B1 learners are afraid of people because they don't know what they look like when they speak. They feel awkward, they think their mouth looks funny, or their face looks stressed.
Oh, I definitely looked stressed. I probably looked like I was trying to solve a complex math equation every time I said hello.
Exactly. And the brain hates feeling awkward, so it shuts down. The mirror method is about visual desensitization. Step 1. Take that 5-minute podcast clip from the ear hack we talked about in part 2. Step 2. Stand in front of a mirror, not a tiny one, a big one. Step 3. Play the audio. Step 4. This is the shock part. You are going to lip sync the audio while looking directly into your own eyes.
Lip sync? Like a pop star?
Exactly. You don't even need to make a sound at first. Just match the movement of the speaker's mouth. Watch your jaw. Watch your lips. If the speaker sounds happy, your reflection must look happy. If they sound serious, your reflection must look serious.
You're training your face muscles to act English.
Yes, you are killing the English stress face. If you do this for 10 minutes a day, your brain starts to think, hey, looking at me speaking English is normal. It's not scary. It's actually kind of cool.
I remember doing this after that kitchen flood disaster. I stood in front of the mirror and practiced saying, Mr. Henderson, we have a problem with the pipes. I said it 50 times. I watched my face. I tried to look confident, even though I was terrified inside.
And what happened the next time you had to talk to him?
It was like magic. Because I had seen myself saying it, my brain didn't panic. It felt like I was just repeating a scene from a movie I had already filmed. The mirror Leia took over.
Here is a secret most English teachers will never tell you. Fluency is 20% vocabulary and 80% acting.
You can't say that, Knox. People want to learn grammar.
Let them learn grammar. Let them stay at B1. Listen, have you ever met someone who speaks broken English but everyone listens to them? They have high energy, they use their hands, they smile, and they don't care about the.
Yes, my friend Marco. His grammar is terrible, but he's the life of the party.
Because Marco isn't a student. Marco is a communicator. He uses his body. He uses the mirror method instincts naturally. The mirror teaches you that you are allowed to take up space. You're allowed to be loud.
That was my biggest problem. I wanted to be invisible so people wouldn't notice my mistakes.
When you try to be invisible, you become unintelligible. You mumble. Your voice gets quiet. I am from here. Please don't hurt me. No.
That was literally me.
The mirror method fixes that. You practice overacting. Speak 10% louder than you think you should. Open your mouth 10% wider. Use your hands. When you can do it in the mirror, you can do it in the boardroom.
But Knox, a mirror doesn't talk back. How do we kill the fear of the other person?
The interaction trap. Most learners freeze because they're waiting for the other person to judge them. So here's the advanced version of the mirror method. I call it the ghost conversation. My neighbors are going to think I've lost my mind. Who cares what the neighbors think? Your neighbors aren't the ones who are going to double their income by becoming fluent. Pause. Let them think you're crazy while you become successful.
You're right. I did this before my first job interview in English. I sat in my car, looking at the rearview mirror, and I had a 20-minute conversation with the interviewer. I asked the hard questions. I gave the persona answers.
And?
By the time I walked into the building, I felt like I had already had the interview 10 times. My fear response was gone. My heart wasn't racing. I was in control.
This is the difference between a 16,000 subscriber channel that gets no views and a channel that goes viral. This is the difference between a B1 salary and a C1 salary.
Wait, does fluency really change your income that much?
Leia, in the global market, English is the multiplier. If you're a good coder, you make good money. If you're a good coder who speaks English like a persona, you make 5 times as much because you can lead, you can persuade, you can sell.
It's the leadership language.
Exactly. But you can't lead others if you are afraid of the person in the mirror. You have to kill the fear of looking stupid before you can reach the freedom of being heard.
So we have the ear hack, we have the mirror method, we have the identity shift. What is left?
The final piece, the viral growth strategy for your life.
My life or my YouTube channel?
Both, because they're the same thing. In Part 4, we're going to show you the compound effect of English, how to take everything we've talked about and turn it into a career that 2x or 3x your current income.
Are we going to talk about the networking secret?
Even better, we're talking about the status hack, how to make native speakers respect you even if you make a grammar mistake.
Is that even possible?
It's not just possible, it's the only way to win.
If you're still at B1, you are leaving money on the table every single day. You are leaving opportunities in the trash.
Don't let your B1 prison be your permanent home. We've shown you the secret door. We've given you the key. Now, in Part 4, we're going to show you the world outside the prison walls.
I can't wait. My Vancouver story has a very happy ending, and I want everyone to hear how it happened.
Get your mirrors ready. Practice your action hero persona. We'll see you in the final part. Sound of a heavy gate opening and majestic music swell.
Goodbye, B1 prison.
Stop studying, start performing. Music ends with a final resonant beat.
This is it, the end of the line. If you have listened to Part 1, 2, and 3, you now have the tools to escape the prison. But today, we aren't just escaping, we are going to conquer. Today, we talk about status.
This is the part that changed my life, Knox. It's the difference between being the person who helps with the project and the person who leads the project.
Exactly. Listen to me very carefully. In the professional world, people do not care about your grammar. They care about your authority. I've seen people with perfect C2 English who have the status of a doormat. And I've seen people with B1 English who command the entire room.
I was definitely the doormat, Knox. Even when my English improved, I still felt like I had to apologize for existing. I'd start every sentence with, "I'm sorry, my English isn't great, but..."
Stop. Whistle sound. If you are listening to this and you say, "Sorry for my English," you are killing your income. You are literally telling the other person, "Please respect me less."
It's a habit, Knox. We think we are being polite.
It's not polite, it's status suicide. Today, we reveal the status hack, the secret to making people listen to you, even if you forget the past participle of bring.
Guys, listen to Knox here. This is why you aren't getting promoted. This is why your YouTube channel isn't growing.
Here is the status hack in 3 steps. Step 1, the low energy winner. Native speakers who have high status speak slower, not faster. When you are nervous and at B1, you speak like a machine gun. I think we should do this because it is important and I hope you agree. You sound like you're begging for approval.
The approval seeker. I know her well.
High status is calm. Use the power gap. Speak, wait, let them process. Step 2, the correction ban. Never ever correct yourself in the middle of a sentence. If you say, "He go to the store," don't stop and say, "I mean he goes."
But Knox, then they'll think I don't know grammar.
No, if you correct yourself, you look like a student. If you keep going with confidence, they don't even notice the mistake. They are focused on your idea, not your inflection.
That's so true. When I'm focused on a great idea, I don't notice if someone makes a tiny mistake. I only notice if they look embarrassed about it.
Exactly. Embarrassment is the smell of B1. Confidence is the smell of C1.
Let's talk about the money, Knox, because this is where it gets real. When I was stuck in the B1 prison, I was working a junior role. I thought I needed 5 more years of English study to reach the manager level.
5 years? You'd be 100 years old by then.
That's what it felt like. But after I started using the persona and the status hack, something happened. I went into a meeting with my director in Vancouver. I didn't apologize once. I used power phrases like, "The bottom line is," and "Let's look at the big picture."
Those are status signifiers. They are English shortcuts to looking smart.
Within 3 months, I was offered a lead position. My salary didn't just go up, it doubled. Cash register sound effect. And you know what the crazy part was? My English grammar was exactly the same. I just changed my delivery.
Did you hear that? She didn't buy a new dictionary. She bought a new mindset. English is a tool for wealth. If you use it like a student, you get paid like a student. If you use it like a leader, you get paid like a leader.
But Knox, how do our listeners find these power phrases?
Stop watching English lessons on YouTube. Start watching interviews with CEOs, creators, and leaders in your niche. If you want to be a pro editor, watch interviews with the best editors in Hollywood. Don't listen to what they say, listen to how they handle silence.
You're talking about social shadowing.
Yes, shadow their confidence, shadow their ums and ahs. Even natives say but they say it with status.
It's true. A high status sounds like you're thinking deeply. A low status sounds like you're lost.
Now, let's bring this back to the map. We promised you a plan to go viral and change your life in 15 videos.
This is the blueprint for your channel and your career.
Video 1 through 5, which we've already mapped, are about the identity shift. You have to shock your audience out of their old way of thinking. Videos 6 through 10 are about the demonstration. Show them the mirror method. Show them the ear hack. Give them the quick wins. And video 11 through 15, this is where you become the authority.
This is where you talk about the status hack and the income multiplier.
Exactly. By video 15, you aren't just an English podcast, you are a movement. You are the person who saved them from the B1 prison. And when you save someone from a prison, they will follow you anywhere. They will buy your courses, they will join your membership, and they will share your videos with everyone they know.
That's how you 2x your income, not by getting more views, but by providing more transformation.
Transformation is the only product that never goes out of style.
You know, Knox, 3 years ago, I was crying on a wet floor in Vancouver. I felt like the world was too big for me. I felt like English was a wall I could never climb. But standing here today, I realized the wall wasn't real. It was just a shadow.
A shadow created by bad teaching.
Exactly. To everyone listening, you are not bad at English. You are just untrained in the art of being yourself in another language. You have a beautiful, powerful voice inside you. Don't let a grammar rule keep it locked up.
The world is waiting for your story, not the perfect English version, the real version.
Use the mirror. Listen to the music. Claim your status.
And most importantly, stop being a student. Start being the host of your own life. Sound of a massive crowd cheering. Uplifting cinematic music swell.
We did it, Knox. Part 4 is a wrap.
To the audience, this is the end of the series, but it's the beginning of your journey. If you are one of the 16,000 who felt dead, wake up. The impressions are coming. The views are coming. But only if you have the courage to be bold.
To everyone listening, go record your first video. Use the hook. Use the status. We believe in you.
Burn the textbooks. Speak your truth. We'll see you at the top.
Bye, everyone. Happy speaking.
Don't translate, just lead. Music reaches a final triumphant crescendo and cuts to silence.